Further debate? I recognize a member from Guelph.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's always an honour to rise in the House and debate important issues. And Line 5's contribution to Ontario's economy and energy needs is well documented, and the government members have certainly documented that today. 53% of our petroleum products and 4,900 jobs in Sarnia are directly affected by Line 5. And while there are other ways to ship crude oil to Ontario, we've been shipping half of it through Line 5 for 65 years. And so that's why I find the Premier's negotiating strategy on this perplexing. Questioning the competency of the Governor of Michigan and dismissing Michigan's concerns about the health and safety of the Great Lakes is not the most strategic way to negotiate for the people of Ontario. So no wonder the Governor hasn't returned the Premier's call. So my recommendation to the Premier is to take Michigan's concerns about the health and safety of the Great Lakes seriously and address them accordingly as part of a strategic bargaining strategy. I also believe the Premier and the government needs to take this situation as a wake-up call that Ontario needs to diversify its economy and take aggressive climate action and move aggressively to transition Ontario off of fossil fuels in a just and responsible way, in a way that supports workers in Sarnia and people across the province. You know, Speaker, earlier this week I spoke in favour of a private member's bill from the Conservative caucus to reduce polystyrene pollution in the Great Lakes, and I was happy to vote for that bill. And so I'm hoping that the members opposite take the concerns around other forms of pollution in the Great Lakes seriously as well. Speaker, the Great Lakes provide drinking water for 35 million people. The Great Lakes directly support more than 1.3 million jobs that generate $82 billion in wages annually. The area around the Great Lakes is home to 107 million people on both sides of the border, generating 51 million jobs and $6 trillion U.S. in GDP. So if we threaten the integrity of the Great Lakes, it will have a huge economic impact on the people of this region and, most importantly, on our drinking water. And that's exactly why the Great Lakes Business Network, an organization of businesses who rely on the health of the Great Lakes for tourism, farming, fishing, and more, have raised concerns about the risk posed by Line 5. Speaker, it does us no good to dismiss these concerns. So thankfully, Line 5 has not, in its 65 years, had a spill into the Great Lakes. Though it has experienced 33 spills since 1968, that's resulted in 1.1 million gallons of oil being spilled along its route. Speaker, Line 5 is a 65-year-old pipeline that was designed to have a 50-year lifespan. And so the question I have for Enbridge is, what were you doing 15 or 20 years ago when the life of the pipeline was coming to an end? What were you doing to ensure safety? Where was the Ontario government in questioning why aren't we upgrading the safety of this pipeline 20 years ago? This is especially important when you consider how vital it is to our economic interests and to our energy systems. You know, Speaker, a University of Michigan study predicted that if this line would spill, and it hasn't to this point, thankfully, 700 miles of shoreline in the Great Lakes would be affected. The author of the study said that the Mackinac Straits is probably about the worst place you would ever want to have a pipeline spill. It would have devastating consequences on our drinking water, our tourism, agriculture, fish, birds, and the economy. It would be an unparalleled disaster for the Great Lakes, the study concluded. 70% of the spill would not be able to be cleaned up and would likely result in $6.3 billion worth of damage. So I think we have an obligation, Speaker, as part of our negotiations with Michigan, to say the two of us are going to work hand in hand to ensure the safety of this pipeline, which is 15 years past its best before date.
Peterborough Kawartha, come to order.
Yeah, they are. That's why they're looking at building a tunnel that they started the permit process 2 years ago on a pipeline that's 15 years past its best before date. So I'm just saying, I'm trying to help you with the negotiations here, and you're heckling me. But anyway, Ontarians have to take these concerns seriously because the risks are high. We have an obligation to mitigate the risk. We owe it to everyone who uses the Great Lakes to do that, and we especially owe it to the 35 million people in present and future generations who rely on the Great Lakes for their drinking water. So, Speaker, this is a wake-up call for the province of Ontario about how vulnerable our economy and our energy systems are to be so dependent on one source of energy. It shows how we need to diversify our economy and our energy systems. And we especially owe it to the workers in Sarnia to transition to a clean economy. And it starts in Sarnia with the Biofuel Alternative Institute, or the Bioindustrial Innovation Center, which is developing biofuel alternatives. I've toured the facility a number of times now. The Sarnia-Lambton Economic Partnership says that biofuels are integrating the established petrochemical and refining industry with Ontario's abundant supply of agricultural feedstocks to take advantage of Sarnia-Lambton's premier location for the development and investment in bio-based chemistry technologies, manufacturing, and fuels. So we can take feedstock from Ontario's forests and farms, many of it waste, and have it replace petrochemicals, keeping money and jobs right here in Ontario. But we need a government who's going to invest in that transition to ensure those workers actually have a future, Speaker. One of the members said someday in the future, I've actually toured one of those plants that's using made in Ontario feedstock to power it. Yes, yeah, you're right. Just last year, so it's not just agricultural inputs. Just last year, $30 million new facility being built in Sarnia that will take technology from waste fats and oils and turn it into renewable fuels, including the jet fuel that the government talks about that we need for Pearson International Airport. So what I need the members opposite to understand, that if we're going to successfully negotiate anything with Michigan, we need a plan to protect the Great Lakes, and we need a transition plan away from fossil fuels. We need to understand that climate action is job action. We need to understand that Ontario is perfectly positioned to be the global leader in the emerging electrical vehicle market. You know, GM just announced that in the next 10 to 15 years, or 15 years, they're going to be completely not making internal combustion engines anymore. Are we ready as a province for that? We should be, because we have the mining and manufacturing skills and talent and facilities to make that transition happen and for us to be a global leader. We are well positioned to take Ontario-based products and to make them to be the biofeedstock not only for the fuels and petrochemicals in Sarnia, but also in our manufacturing facilities. At the University of Guelph, the Bioproducts Institute is coming up with all kinds of ways to replace petrochemicals, to use made in and grown in Ontario feedstocks to replace plastics in a number of manufacturing processes, including in the automobile sector. So, Speaker, we have the ability right now, we have the technology right now to capitalize on where global investment is going, and that's in the low-carbon economy. And so the question is, do we have the political will in this province to lead the world, or are we going to allow the world to get ahead of us? That's the question.
Thank you.